How to do blending with a ballpoint pen. Welcome to the series How to Draw with a Ballpoint Pen Part 5. Let's start the video. First, let's see the difference between layering and blending. Here I have taken a lengthy rectangular area. I'm marking points at equal distances and numbering the divided sections. So I have divided this area into 8 equal parts. Now we have to hatch the entire rectangular area using clotheslines. This is layer 1. Next, we have to hatch layer 2 up to this point. Now I'm hatching layer 3 up to this point. Next, layer 4 up to this point. Layer 5 up to this point. Layer 6 up to this point. Layer 7 up to this point. And finally, layer 8 up to this point. For all this hatching, I used normal pressure. I did not use lighter pressure or higher pressure. This is the layering process using parallel hatching. I already explained layering in part 4, but there I demonstrated it separately in different square areas. Here, I'm showing it again in one rectangular area to clearly explain the difference between layering and blending. Now, I have done the same process here using cross-hatching. I used normal pressure for the hatching. So these are the two layering processes. Now, let's understand what blending means. Here, you can observe that by using layering, we created 8 different shading levels from lighter to darker. So, between 2 different shading levels, you can see a boundary line separating the 2 shadings. Blending means making these boundary lines disappear while still showing the variation between the 2 different shading levels. In other words, we need to show that there are 2 different shading levels but without making the border line between them visible. So, let's see how to do blending. First, let's do blending using parallel hatching. Again, I have taken a lengthy rectangular area. I marked points at equal distances, divided it into 8 equal parts and numbered them.
Now, we have to hatch the entire area with layer 1. Next, we have to hatch layer 2 up to this point. Blending depends mainly on pressure control. As you get closer to this point, you have to gradually reduce the normal pressure you are currently using and continue hatching with lighter pressure. Also, you should not stop exactly at this point. You need to go slightly beyond this point and enter into the layer 1 area, gradually reducing the pressure so that layer 2 blends smoothly into layer 1. Next, I have to hatch layer 3 up to this point. As I explained earlier, when you get closer to this point, gradually reduce the pressure. Even after crossing this point, continue for some distance while reducing the pressure so that layer 3 blends into layer 2. Next, layer 4. Then layer 5. Layer 6. Layer 7. And finally, layer 8. Here you can observe the difference between layering and blending. The visible lines are no longer noticeable, but the shading still changes gradually from darker to lighter, creating a value gradient. Now, let's see how to do blending using cross-hatching. Again, I have taken a rectangular area and divided it into 8 equal parts. I'm hatching layer 1 in the direction shown by the arrow. Next, I'm hatching layer 2 in this direction, following the same process as before. As I get closer to this point, I gradually reduce the pressure and continue hatching so that it blends into layer 1. Next, layer 3. Layer 4. Layer 5. Layer 6. Layer 7. And finally, layer 8. So you can now clearly observe the difference between layering and blending. To do blending perfectly, you need to learn hatching properly. You need to know how to hatch perfectly and how to hatch lightly.
I already explained hatching in detail in part 3. If you haven't watched it yet, watch that video and first learn hatching properly. Once you understand hatching, layering and blending become much easier. Also, when you practice blending, don't practice all 8 layers at once like I showed here. Instead, practice blending between any 2 different shading levels first. I hope you understood. Thanks for watching.